Well, hey there, and welcome to Conversations in Color. My name is Ed, and I am so excited to have you join in on this conversation that we're going to have here in a couple minutes. We already had it, but it was so rich. It was just Rod Jones from the CIC team, University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire as well, and me, and we got into some deep water at times, and there were some really thick, dense parts of the conversation. There was some light stuff too. And I'm looking forward to you engaging in it here with us. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to mention our incredible sponsors, Shift Cyclery and Coffee Bar, who provide this incredible venue for us every week. I want to thank the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire, Pablo Center at the Confluence, and Converge Radio 101.9. Without these incredible sponsors, the show could not happen. So we're very, very thankful. And then I wanted to also mention that if you enjoy the show, if you are learning anything or just you want to stay up with what we're doing, we'd invite you to like our Facebook page, the Conversations in Color Facebook page, and also subscribe on our YouTube page, on our YouTube channel, so that you can stay up with whatever videos come up along the way here. And you can check out our previous episodes as well. So without further ado, I invite you into the conversation. Well, Rod, I mean, I'm glad I get to hang out with you, but we were supposed to have a guest.
Yeah, well, we'll make do. Make do between us.
We will.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you had a colleague that was going to join us, but family illness kind of set in, and
yes.
real life happened.
Yeah, and she's committed to coming on the show when she has an opportunity. Yeah. So we would definitely welcome Dr. Heather Ann Moody whenever she has a chance.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah,
it'll be great. Speaking of reality and real life kicking in, the outside right now is some real life that smacks you in the face as soon as you step outside.
Yeah, I tell you, being a Florida boy all my life, and I was just telling you all prior to the start of the show that for me now, interestingly, 30 degrees is actually warm.
Right.
When you compare it to a day like today where it's just biting and bitter cold.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so I'm looking forward to the 30s again.
I hear you. Well, maybe it'll be in the 30s again when this show actually airs, when it's actually posted on YouTube. But
absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, how you been? Doing all right?
I'm doing well. Just trying to get through the semester at UWEC. Finals are on our heels, and City Council is keeping me busy, and life is good but busy.
Sure.
Can't really complain.
Yeah.
Doesn't do you much good if you do.
Correct. Well, and speaking of that, on the way in, I was, it took until about 2/3 of the way here for the heat in my van to really kick in. I'm not quite sure it even was up to the task, but I was, inwardly complaining about the weather, and then I saw somebody laying in an entryway over here.
Right.
And, right away, I'm like, you know what? I should probably not complain.
Right. Absolutely.
I got a working vehicle. I got a house where the heat works, and
I tell you, I mean, we always have a way of humbling ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And coincidentally, I guess that was a moment for you, right?
It was.
We have to count our blessings. That's for certain.
Yep, absolutely. Well, what's been on your mind here lately? I mean,
a litany of things. We had some pretty significant cases that just were rendered, some verdicts that were rendered, the Rittenhouse. We had the Ahmaud Arbery. We have some cases before the Supreme Court right now. We have where do you start? Where do you end, right? There's so many different things going on in this country that I think that is quite, I don't know if alarming is the best word, but I think definitely controversial.
Yeah.
Right? And regardless of your political leanings. But yeah, there's a lot going on, and I think there's a lot of things that are just kind of causing some consternation for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, even outside of what we typically think about as justice and equity issues.
Sure.
You have the Supreme Court arguing the Mississippi law right now regarding abortion, and so that's obviously in a lot of people's minds. Yeah, there's a lot happening.
It's a lot.
Now. Yeah, I had mentioned this to you just a few minutes ago, but I think it'd be great for us to talk about because while we have on the national landscape lots of stuff happening, here locally there's some stuff going on too.
Oh yeah.
And I had mentioned on a previous episode about how a couple weeks ago at an Altoona basketball game, Altoona Middle School, I think the high school, I don't know if they were playing yet or not, but a couple weeks ago, there was an incident where one of the high school students took a picture of a black younger student and put some disparaging comments about this person on social media, and I think it's just something to think about. We got an email from the superintendent the following day. Went out to all the families that have students at Altoona that talked about it a little bit, and my first thought was, is that my kid? Because we were there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was my first thought.
Absolutely.
But it was a pretty poignant reminder that that we are certainly not exempt from foolishness.
Sure.
Here.
Yeah, and even to kind of like dovetail that, and I'm thinking about the local case that happened in Utah with the young, black girl. I think she was 10. She had autism, and she was basically ridiculed and heckled, and teacher from the accounts that I've read and heard, right? Teacher in many ways made her feel undesirable, unwanted in the classroom. And the little girl, man, she committed suicide, 10 years old, right, with autism. So you think about, on that local scale, right?
Right.
And it's just interesting how, these dynamics, play themselves out. And unfortunately, people kind of, approach them with a certain degree of superficiality.
Yeah.
Right. But, for those families, these are heartfelt, gut-wrenching experiences.
Right.
Right.
That's my kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think we also minimize the psychological and emotional impact that this has on our children. Mm-hmm. Right. Because we look at them oftentimes as just simply being resilient. Right. And that they have no way of internalizing these issues like we do. Well, as we see, more and more kids, right, are committing these types of acts upon themselves and against others.
Right.
You look at the case that just happened in, what's the city I'm thinking about?
You're talking about over in Michigan?
Yes,
school
over in Michigan.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? It's sad.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I overheard my son talking to a friend of his. They were playing Fortnite and speaking, over the microphone, and talking about the school shooting in Michigan and processing it. And there's this part of me like, do I really want him talking to his friend about this? Because I don't know,
Sure.
Are they really in a position to counsel each other through it, kind of thing? Right? But then I'm like, but at the same time, I mean, they're middle schoolers,
right?
And maybe there's something to them being able to talk together and process together a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about my younger son, well, my older son. When he was in high school, he had a friend of his. This is pretty, tragic and macabre to talk about. But he had a friend, man, who was actually stabbed in the heart and died on the spot when he was in high school. Right. And I saw just the emotional turmoil and just how much support he needed from us as his parents. Right. Mm-hmm. It was tough. And I had never seen my son be so emotional. Right. Mm-hmm. And to kind of respond that way to tragedy. Right. And it was hurtful and painful for me as a parent. Right. To see my child agonizing in that way.
Right.
But yeah, kids, while they are resilient, right, we have to circle the wagons, with them when they're going through these types of situations. And I think it is cathartic for them to maybe process it with their peers, right? And you want to try to help them do that in very constructive ways, right? But I think there's something to be said about them actually talking through those issues amid each other, right? And talking about it in ways that they can understand, right? And allowing ourselves to be vessels, right, in terms of answering any questions and perhaps reaching out for additional support from others who may be more knowledgeable than we are, right, and helping students process this type of stuff. Right. So it's a lot.
In your academic field and your day-to-day work, do you at all tackle, how do you deal with these kind of traumatic events?
Not so much the trauma, right, of events like this, right? But I do talk about the importance of, working through our sense of bias, right? When we're working with students, when we're working with parents, right? How it's important for us to really kind of take on this socially justice-oriented lens, right? And understanding that not everybody has a certain degree of privilege, right? Not everybody has the wherewithal or the resources, right? To advocate for themselves, and how we as professional educators, right? We have to help families and students fill that void, and so I try to have conversation with the pre-service teachers with whom I work about these issues, right? And helping them understand the just how significant their role is, right? In that process, right? Especially when you're working with students with disabilities, because that's my field, right? And historically, students with disabilities, we know, have been marginalized, right? They have been historically excluded. And they really only have been in public education since the early 70s. Before then, many of them were institutionalized, right? And so they haven't really been, a part of the educational arena, in the way that we've come to see them now as of late. All that long. Only a few decades.
What drew you into that field?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it was my uncle.
Okay.
My uncle was diagnosed, and I was a kid. I really didn't understand what my uncle was dealing with, right? I knew that he was eccentric. I knew there was something that was quite different about him, comparatively speaking, when you think about, the rest of my family. And he was ostracized by many members of my family. Come to find out that he was diagnosed as bipolar schizophrenic. Okay. And he was basically he always stayed pretty much secluded in his room. Not a lot of socialization with even some of the family members, right? So Uncle Edward was quite different, right? And I didn't understand when I was younger why. And I think for me, it was, I don't know, I had a certain degree of, sympathy or empathy for him.
Sure.
Because I just thought that he was just not treated very well by many people, even people outside of the family. I would see how they would talk about Uncle Edward and treat Uncle Edward. And so my heart, I guess, even at a young age, without really fully understanding, that I wanted to work with people, right, who were misunderstood, right, who needed strong allies, right, to help defend them and help them to activate resources and so on and so forth. So that was really my initial draw. And I really didn't understand that until I actually considered a degree in education. This is what I want to do. And I started thinking about why. It was because of my earlier experiences with my family member, right? And it was just a nice fit for me. And ever since, well over 20 years now, this is what I've been doing. And I like fighting for the underdog, so to speak. Sure. Right? And so that's kind of, my nature and disposition.
Well, it's a justice issue, like you were talking about,
Absolutely.
I mean, I think one of the great things that I have been challenged with in the last year since we started doing this, Conversations in Color, has been thinking about neurodivergence and things like that. And by no means I don't have any expertise, but what I'm recognizing more and more is how there's like mental illness, even that word doesn't, to me, like I almost wonder if it's not the appropriate term. Like if it's just a matter of kind of everybody is on this grand spectrum of how we function and how we think and how we process things and whatever. And it's not really about illness, it's about different. It's about, like.
Yeah, it's about, about understanding our sense of humanity, right? I mean, there's nothing, it's interesting that you actually talk about this because, like you mentioned, how do we frame problems, right? How do we frame experiences, right? And oftentimes we do this in binaries.
Right.
Good, bad, evil, whatever, right?
Right.
And so, typical, atypical, right? And so it's interesting how we use, terms to frame, social problems, right? And I think there's something to be said about that, and how we've come to understand our existence, right? And and when you talk about neurodiversity, right? Well, how do we know? And I think about Uncle Edward, right? What was it? I mean, there was something genius about him,
right?
In a way that none of us would ever understand,
right?
Yep. And this is one thing that I've come to learn about being in this profession, working with individuals with disabilities, right? They are so, complex, right? We are so complex, right? But I think it's fascinating because when you have an opportunity to work with people who are quote unquote atypical, you begin to understand and realize just how much you don't know as atypical.
Right.
They teach you a lot, right? And so I've been very fortunate to learn a lot from people that we consider to be atypical or disabled people.
Right.
There's a lot of genius, in so-called disabled people, right? And so I've learned that, and I come to appreciate that. And it's really been humbling for me to work with students with disabilities, individuals with disabilities, because I've learned so much about myself in that process, right? It's been very humbling,
right?
When you have to step outside of yourself, right, and really work to understand, and I'm using the word genius of another individual, a person that we may consider to be, atypical, right? Because when you realize just how much you don't know, right, you really can come full circle in terms of having a full appreciation for our sense of humanity.
Yeah.
And that's why, I love what I do, because I've learned so much,
right.
And then too, just working with parents, man, I mean, it's my gosh, man. I mean, some of the more complex cases that I've had over the years, and then just how difficult they've been for parents, how hard they've been on families, right? For kids who have some of the most profound disabilities, right? Your heart just goes out to them because this is something that they have to live 24/7.
Right.
I only get to work with them for maybe 4, 5, 6 hours a day. You got to deal with them 24/7.
Right.
And it's just you just really learn a lot, man. I'm just really fortunate.
Yeah, and it's hard too, I think for parents of atypical children, because and to an extent, probably all parents deal with this this emotion or this ambivalence where it's like you really love your child, but you really need a break. You really need to step away.
Absolutely.
So,
even when you got so-called typical
I'm telling you, yes.
like you say, I mean, yeah, absolutely, man. That's real.
Yeah.
That is real.
Yeah.
And
I almost just want to say that out loud, like, if anybody's listening in on this conversation who needs a break, like, that's legit.
Yeah. And you don't have to feel bad about it.
Right.
That's for real.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's part of the human condition.
Right.
That's part of the human condition. I mean, let's be real. Right?
And it speaks to why we're dependent upon each other in a community setting.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think we've been, in many ways, we've been kind of taught to feel guilty.
Yeah.
But no, there's something that's very, very real about that. There's something that's very actually therapeutic about having those breaks, right? I mean, God bless grandparents. Yes,
indeed. Hey, so, I'm curious, I'm thinking about that thing that happened in Altoona.
Sure.
And as a parent, like, what would your response be? I've got a child of color who's a part of that school system. There's a part of me that wants to go fight everybody, and there's a part of me that wants to, write the school board and whatever. When I say fight, I'm not talking physical. I'm talking about just, raising a verbal and emotional ruckus as needed.
It's tough. I mean, it's really tough because, you know that, and as a person of color too, right? There's a different dynamic there too, right? It's tough because if you cause too much of a roar, right? You worry that you may make the situation worse for your child.
Right.
Right. I think naturally all parents do that, right?
Sure.
But at the same time, you want to advocate for your child, right? I mean, you must advocate for your child. And I think for me is just doing the homework and trying to understand, what were the actions, that leadership has taken in that situation, and really trying to get to the bottom of it. And I think oftentimes, we just naturally fly off the handle,
right?
As parents, right? Because we fiercely love our kids and we want to make sure that, they're protected, they're safe, and so on and so forth, right? And it's hard, really kind of coming at it from I guess being, I want to say, rational, not to suggest that parents are not rational, right? But sometimes we become overzealous, right, with our emotions, right? And I think for me, it would be to try to figure out, doing my homework and trying to figure out, what was the causation of some of that, right? What was done to mitigate, if anything was done, right? To mitigate that, historically, how often does this type of behavior occur? Right. How has it been addressed in the past? So now I'm trying to make those direct and tangential connections as to how, these systems, right, have functioned, right, to either diminish or to reinforce this behavior. And I think for me, that's what I try to look at, right? Because then it becomes more than just about my child. Right. And that's why I think, as a minority, right? For me, yes, this happened to my child, but I want to make sure it doesn't happen to other children of color. Right. So I kind of look at it at the micro, and at the macro. And that's where, I think for me, that's where the challenge begins in terms of trying to help institute transformational changes within systems, right? That function to consistently reinforce, right? These systems of hate and oppression, or whatever you want to call it, right? Subjugation, or if there's people who are genuinely committed to changing these systems. And I think oftentimes, if you just deal with it at the micro, it gets lost in translation.
Right. No, I think, and that makes sense to me, because as you were talking, what I was kind of gleaning from from what you were saying was there's kind of two things that I need to understand. One is, like as you said, how is the leadership of the school system responding to this?
Absolutely.
You know, what steps are they taking? But then to try to understand, is this, you know, a one-off of somebody just being stupid, or is this a cultural problem?
Absolutely.
You know, within that school system, and then how you respond to it.
Absolutely.
Differs according to, you know, varies according to what you get from
Absolutely, because, you know, to be honest with you, and I mean, you want all parents, right? All parents want their kids to go to a school that is safe, that is inviting, that is welcoming, right? That embraces them in their full potential. All parents want that for their children, right? You know, so I want to understand what kind of system
Right.
I'm placing my child into.
Right.
And whether or not I need to remove my child from that system.
Right.
Right? If that system does not protect the interests of my child.
Right.
And so I'm always kind of looking at the micro, at the macro, right? When I'm dealing with these kind of issues.
Yeah.
And I have 2 daughters, you know, biracial, and soon they will be in the school systems here, right? And so I'm going to be interrogating how these school systems work, right? Yep. I'm an educator to the core, right? I love education. Right, but I also know that, you know, there are systems historically within this country, within education, right, that have not always done well on behalf of children of color. Right. You know, and I'm just being real. Yeah. Right. And so I'm always curious and just kind of want to make sure that I'm always doing my homework. Right. You know, and I think all parents do that. I mean, if you move to a different town or whatever, you're trying to vie for the best school. You know, you want to put your kid where, you know, you consider to be the best school, and all parents want that for their kids. Right. You know, we want what's best for our kids. Yeah. You know. Absolutely. And truthfully, I don't know whether or not there is a cultural issue in this particular context or not. Right. But I think it makes sense. Let's dig in and find out. Sure. You know? Well, you know, and that's, again, it's the lens that you take into these situations. It's the lens, right? I mean, you know, the way you approach it, you know, your orientation and your, you know, certain questions that are always at the back of and at the forefront of your mind when you come into these, you know, arenas, right? And so, you know, it's tough, man. Yeah. It's tough. Yeah. All around. Just take it one step at a time. That's all we can do, man. See what we can do. Yeah. That's all we can do. And I think, you know, just to be open and willing to have these conversations, right, regardless of how painful they might be, you know, will hopefully, you know, help move the needle, you know, and help people see, you know, the changes that need to be made, right, when things like this occur. Yeah. You know, that's all we can hope for. Right. Well, let's change course for just a moment. Really important question. Sure. We are in the midst of the holiday season. And I'm curious, like, you know, you got Christmas Day coming up, you know, Hanukkah's here, like all, you know, Kwanzaa's around the corner. Sure. There's all these things. You know, what does Christmas look like in the Jones house? Yeah, good question. Christmas, it's I should say the season. What does the season look like? Yeah, absolutely. So we'll say that, you know, the season in and of itself is really about, you know, I would say one, spiritual renewal. Right. This is a moment for us to kind of step back and reflect, you know, on our blessings, right? To appreciate the gifts that's been afforded to us, right? And so we're very thankful. We pause and really give thanks, right, for what we have and for a lot in the world, so to speak, right? So that's that piece of it, right? But then, you know, we also, you know, like other families, man, we really get into the spirit of gift giving and all that stuff too, right? And so right now, if you think about just, you know, what's going on inside the Jones home right now, the Joneses home. Yeah, you walk in, you'll see, you know, the staircase kind of, you know, sprinkled with garland that's lit up, right? You would see, what did my wife call this thing? Christmas town kind of display.
Oh, sure.
Right, the Christmas tree has actually been up since like the first week of November.
Wow, all right.
Yeah, our 4-year-old.
See, I'll take this seriously.
Well, man, listen, man, my 4-year-old, man, she wanted that tree up.
Yeah.
She was ready.
Yeah.
And so we said, what the heck, we're not going to fight it. So
Sure.
we just put it up, right? We're getting excited. We're going to have some family to come in and visit us.
That's right.
Right,
yeah.
for about 10 days or so.
Is that going to be about right, or is that going to be about 5 days too long?
It's going to be right, man, right on time. My wife and I, we definitely plan to capitalize on those 10 days. Man.
Yeah, I hear you.
We can use a little respite. Right, we were talking about a break earlier, right? That parents oftentimes need, and
sure,
we're gonna capitalize on that break.
I hear that.
Yes, sir. Man.
I wonder now. So you
I can't wait. June 21st. I'm sorry, June.
December.
December 21st. December 21st, man. I'm already wishing we were in the summer.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm already wishing we were in the summer, man. Beyond the academic year.
I hear you. So you were raised in South Florida, or Florida? No, the Panhandle. You said.
Yeah, I was born in the Panhandle. Yes.
And I was raised in southeastern Virginia. That's where I grew up and lived there till I was 20. So I'm curious about, like the traditions of your household,
Sure.
growing up. For us, my dad has multiple siblings, and every Christmas Eve we would go to my grandmother's house.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And have a huge feast. And then we'd have presents, for all the cousins and nephews and nieces.
Sounds very similar.
And then the next day, what we would typically do is get up and, open up all the presents, and then we'd go around to everybody's house and,
Yep. That is essentially what we do.
Oh yeah.
I mean, almost identical.
Yep.
Almost identical. We open up a few gifts Christmas Eve. We do a few, then we finish the rest on Christmas Day. Typically, we used to go to grandparents' house, like you said, have a huge feast. Yeah. I mean, pretty similar, man.
Yeah. Well, now tell me, okay, the feast, what was that feast made up of? What are the things that were distinctive or that stood out to you?
Yeah.
Growing up?
Man, I think some of it was the common, staples, right? I mean, you had your turkey, you had your ham, you had, believe it or not, now this is I don't know if this is so much a Southern thing. It might be. But they had to be prepared correctly, or else, man, they would create a very pungent smell in your house.
You talking about collards?
I'm talking about chitlins.
Chitlins. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So you a little bit from the South.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're that deep South.
Well, we didn't have that as a part of our Christmas tradition, but we have people who eat plenty of chitlins.
Yeah. I mean, but you know the smell, though, right?
It's been a long time.
Ooh, boy. But they had to be immaculately cleaned.
Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, they would light up your house. That's for real. And so sometimes we would have that, right? But like you mentioned too, collards.
Yeah.
Collard greens could be, pretty pungent as well.
Yeah. That's why we don't have them in the holiday celebrations in my house now.
I mean, never really ate pumpkin pie, actually, until I would probably say within the last 5 years, maybe.
Okay.
I was always a sweet potato pie man.
Okay.
And that's all we really, we were raised on sweet potato pies.
Right.
We grandmother, she made a lot of cakes. I don't remember all the types of cakes. I think coconut cakes, red velvet cakes, and, lemon cakes. And yeah, she was a baker.
All right.
She loved to bake, man. And we would just, sometimes we would have barbecue and mac and cheese, potato salad. And
wow.
Yeah, man.
That sounds all right.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the staples too.
Yeah, absolutely.
My aunt would make stuffing with oysters in it.
Oh,
so
wow.
oyster stuffing,
Okay.
and that was when I was real
Especially
young. I wouldn't
on
try
Chesapeake,
that. Yes,
right? You think your Chesapeake? You grew up on Chesapeake Bay, right?
Well, close to the bay, but Chesapeake City was my city.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we ate fresh seafood all the time. So,
yeah.
So that was when I was a young kid. I wouldn't eat that because that sounded gross to me. Then as I got older, that's all I wanted.
Yeah, you hadn't quite developed a palate for it.
That is correct. That is correct. And collard greens. That is honestly one of my fondest memories in terms of food was eating collard greens with a bunch of hot pepper vinegar on it. Man. You know,
put that hot sauce on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's making me salivate right now, honestly. Yeah. But it sounds like we had a lot of similar. Very
similar. I mean, a lot of similiarities, you know, in those traditions.
Grandma had the sweetened iced tea in the fridge.
Oh yeah, man.
She made homemade fudge too. She'd always have homemade fudge laying around, and
we didn't do that.
That was always. But you know, it's as funny as the things you remember, right? Like as a kid, I think back to, she had this little tabletop decoration thing where you turned the thing on. I think you had to crank something, and it was like these 3 or 4 little people on it, and they would start skating around on the thing. Yeah, you know, it was like magnets underneath of it or whatever. And I remember that, and I remember the other thing. I remember sitting around on the table. There was always the grandma candy was laying around, but she always had a big bowl of nuts with the shells on it. You know, and you can.
We My grandparents loved nuts of different types and sorts as well. They always had some of those, and they actually had the old school nutcrackers too. You know, you kind of grip like this and.
Yeah, my son just recently decided he wanted to try that, so they actually bought a cheap cracker thing. And yeah. But it's fun to think about that because, you know, while I think, you know, obviously we have similarities in terms of generational to an extent, and then growing up in the South. I mean, you're much deeper South than me, but really our traditions are very similar, you know.
Yeah, I would say so. The only difference I would say is probably while fudge was your
chitlins and fudge.
Yeah, sweet potato pie was my fudge, right? So you had fudge as fudge, and I had sweet potato pie as fudge.
yes.
So I would say that's probably the starkest difference there, my friend.
That could be.
I haven't heard you mention sweet potato pie yet.
No, I don't remember even eating. I think they made it. Like I don't know if we had it at Christmas. Yeah. But it was definitely something that people ate in my area. Pumpkin pie. But I wouldn't try pumpkin pie when I was a kid.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Like if we had a chocolate, like a chocolate pie with whipped cream or something like that, I was gonna eat that. I didn't want your apple pie. I didn't want pumpkin pie.
None of that.
I want chocolate.
Okay.
Or lemon. Yeah. Like lemon meringue.
That's why you remember that fudge so well.
Yes. Unfortunately, I probably have some really unhealthy, you know, connections emotionally with.
Well, you see how excited we're in this conversation.
I know, right?
We're all in now.
The tone has lifted completely. Yes.
I mean, animated and all, right?
That's right.
I mean, you started talking about food, brother.
Yeah.
In the South too.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So thinking about the holidays, and as I mentioned before, you know, there's Hanukkah in the mix, and then there's Kwanzaa, which is a newer holiday tradition.
Sure.
And then there's the alleged war on Christmas.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting thing to me when I think about diversity, and I think about justice issues and whatever, but really mostly about diversity.
Sure.
Even coming into the holidays, there can be angst.
Sure.
You know?
Absolutely.
Which is crazy to me. Like, can't we just...
It is, yeah.
Like, you know, find peace?
You know, I think there's so much religiosity associated, right?
Yeah.
With these things. And I think... right, for whatever it's worth, I think that religiosity, right, has really shaped the way that we behave around these issues and traditions and so on.
I'm glad that you said religiosity and not faith or spirituality.
Religiosity.
Yeah.
That's
a much different dynamic.
Right.
Yeah.
So why do you say that?
Because I look at the Christmas tradition specifically, coming from a Christian background and being a follower of Jesus. I consider myself a follower of Jesus. I I know Jesus likely wasn't born on December 25th, historically speaking. I know that I believe that, so many different traditions from different cultural backgrounds historically have come in to create what we know as the Christmas tradition here now. And really, the way that we celebrate Christmas now with Santa Claus and all the things, that's like, 150 years old.
Yeah.
And so...
And very commoditized right now.
Well, right. Yeah. And so I think, I grew up in a household where it was like, Jesus is the reason for the season, and Christmas is all about that and the birth of Christ and all those kinds of things.
It's shifted.
And as I have grown, as I have developed and just thought about things differently, I'm like, well, I'm all about celebrating the coming of Jesus. That's a great thing to do. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that means that we can't enjoy all of the cultural things that have come along with the holiday season. You know, so I mean, if you want to get really religious, you shouldn't have a Christmas tree in your house because that's from a pagan tradition, and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that.
Absolutely.
And so that's where angst comes in for me. It's like, come on, man, just enjoy things. Just be with people and enjoy it. If you have to have this one theme that's gonna drive the holiday season, let it be peace on earth. Let it be peace. Right. That's where it's not, to me, the war on Christmas, the folks that feel like Christmas is under siege. Sure. That's not spirituality to me, that's religiosity. Right. And to an extent, maybe even a political piece.
Yeah, absolutely. It's these narratives, right? These practices, many of them contrived, right? That we employ, right, to stake our claims, right? When in fact, I'm with you. I mean, really, there's a larger message, and let us embrace each other. Let us love one another. Let us have peace and joy, right? Thanksgiving, right? I'm thinking about the fruits of the Spirit here, right? Let us embrace those things. Yeah. Right? With one another, right? And I think if we were able to do that, we'll be a better world, right? But, again, that's where religiosity, right, oftentimes separates us. Right. From embracing those things.
Yeah, we can go super deep into this stuff because it's stuff I'm thinking about all the time. But
I know.
But yeah, I mean, it's where I think the diversity piece comes in is like, you have Hanukkah, which is a major holiday celebration for the Jewish community. Right. And so, let's enjoy that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
it's a beautiful thing.
It is.
It's a beautiful thing.
And I'm no expert on Kwanzaa, but from what I understand about Kwanzaa is it's a lot about community and being there for each other and that kind of thing. And so super positive.
It's a beautiful thing.
So I don't know. I think there's so many ways that we try to find to divide ourselves from one another.
Yep. Isn't that interesting that we do that as a species?
Yeah. Why do we do it?
Good question, man.
I mean, I could give you a good religious answer and say, well, Adam and Eve kicked it off in the garden and all that junk.
Right?
But I think there are explanations for it that might be a little fuller than that.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, man. Yeah, that's a complex one right there. Man.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about this whole notion of existentialism. Right. I mean, you can really go deeply philosophically around some of these questions, right? And we don't have time on this show to do that, right?
No.
But it's always fun to kind of allow our minds, right, to delve there, right?
Well, I'll tell you, it's one of the things when I think about that, our tendency to divide into other people, to make others other. Feels like it's proof that we're not innately good all the time. You know what I mean? and so I don't tend to think of things in terms of good and evil as much as I think about love and fear. if I'm living in love with other people, if I'm operating out of that framework of love, I'm going to be focused on other people more than I'm going to be focused on myself, or at least as much as I'm going to be focused on myself. Whereas if I'm in fear, then I got to make sure I got my spot, and I got to make sure you don't mess with my spot. And if you're different from me, there's something wrong with you. You know, so that's, I think, because good and evil, separating into good and evil, I think that becomes a weapon for people, you know, especially when they want to other somebody else, they can label what they're doing as evil.
Right.
And so anyway, I don't know, I'm not trying to answer the question in, 2 minutes here, but for me, it's one of the things I think about a lot with not only the tendency to want to other people, but even just the whole that whole binary way of thinking that you were talking about earlier,
right.
And how unhelpful that is. To me, the fact that we fall into those things, and I think those things are related actually.
Right.
I think that idea that like I want to make that like it's really important for me to feel good about me, my community, the choices I'm making.
Right.
And sometimes for me because when I'm feeling insecure or afraid,
absolutely,
I need to make sure that I'm alienating somebody else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. To your point, Ed, I think, in terms of us being, as divided of a species as we are, right? I think, there's always this inclination, or there seems to be this inclination, right, for us to be better than others,
right?
Right, and we look for ways to make ourselves right better than others. If that's by definition race or language or culture, whatever it may be, right? We look for those isms, right, to claim our superiority.
Right.
Right. And we do this in a myriad of ways. I mean, even if you think about the construct of intelligence, right? We all know that really it's just, what is intelligence? Right? I mean, who gets to say that a person is intelligent or not? Right. And so on what metric? Right.
And based on what standard?
Absolutely, right? And so we constructing things, right? But those who occupy positions of privilege, right, power, whatever it may be, oftentimes are the ones who get to define, right? They get to define what a social problem is, right? Or what a norm is, and whatever it may be, right? And so I think this difference, right? This idea of just us being better than, and I say that in a broader sense, right? Based on all these isms, right, that exist, is what keeps us divided and separated, right? Because we're always trying to create these castes, right? These systems of separation, systems of oppression, systems of domination, systems of whatever it may be, right? That legitimizes, right?
Absolutely.
And now, this may sound heretical, what I'm saying, to a lot of people.
Right now?
Right.
No, it's just the truth.
I'm just saying. I'm just thinking. I'm thinking about our viewers, right?
Right.
I mean, like, what is this guy saying, right? But if you think about it, this is humanity as structured globally.
That's right.
Right.
The people in power write the story.
And so we try to coexist, right, the best way we can. But these systems, right, are perpetually operating to create, right, division. Because division, right, it becomes its own source of reward, right, for those who get to decide, what's normal, what's not.
Right.
What's normal, what's not.
Or
right?
what's legit or what's not.
And so.
I was thinking about just at the beginning of American history where when the country was born. Right. And how you had to be a landowner to be able to vote.
Absolutely.
And I mean, when you really break that out a little bit, it's basically you have to be wealthy to own land.
Right.
And so the wealthy are saying you have to be wealthy to vote.
Sure.
The wealthy are saying that you have to be wealthy to vote. So like it's not even.
Well, that was the Senate. So if you think about it, the Senate wasn't even a real, in terms of having power, right? The Senate was really developed by, it was really a bunch of rich white men, right? I mean, at the very inception of the Senate in this country, right? It's not what we know it to be today. Right. You know, and so if you go back and study some of the history behind, you know, how was the Senate itself created, right? And then who occupied the Senate, right? And then you think about, okay, well, who's in the Senate now? Right? And then some of the dysfunction that surrounds what's happening, you know, within the Senate now. You know, and so these systems, man, you know, it's interesting, you know, Ed, that we having this conversation because, you know, I never forget, you know, when I was about 13 years old, and I was playing on the neighborhood basketball court, and I was out, you know, just doing some little fancy layups, you know, like Mike, because Michael Jordan was a big thing back then, right? And everybody wanted to be like Mike, right? And this older black man came out, and he was kind of dribbling the ball and was playing around. I had never seen him before, you know. He was an older black man, right? And he was actually had some pretty impressive moves, and I was like, whoa. I was surprised that he could actually, you know, play like that. And so I went up and I'm like, you know, I was like asking him all kinds of questions. He was like, son, let me tell you something. He said, well, there's nothing new under the sun. What's being done now has already been done. Now, I didn't know that he was actually quoting Ecclesiastes. Right. Back then when I was 13. But it was only through my readings, I'm like, whoa, that man said that to me when I was 13 years old, right? I remember that, because it was so simple, but yet profound. And I say that because if we think about what's happening now, right? Oftentimes we like to say, oh, this is new, this is different, this is, not really. Yeah. A lot of it is just cyclical. Right. No, that's right. A lot of it is just cyclical. And one thing that's really not cyclical, right, to me, is that dynamic of those who are in power will do whatever they need to do to consolidate their power and to strengthen their power. And I think you see that dynamic, and I think that's important because as the leaders go, the leaders are casting the vision, whether or not they're doing it out loud or they're doing it through their example. Absolutely. As the leaders go, so the people go. And I think about even like in small church contexts. I used to preach in these little churches, you know, out in the middle, sometimes out in the middle of nowhere, when they didn't have a pastor, and they called the school that I went to and say, hey, do you have anybody who can fill the pulpit? And I would go do it. And one of the things I learned with my experience with a lot of these smaller churches is you would have elders in the church, like that was the title elder, who were the leaders of the church, and they were usually old white dudes, and they what I sensed from them many times, not all of them, so I want to be careful, but from some if not many of them, was this within the context and framework of being an elder in that church. It's the only place where they get to exercise control, and they are going to exercise control. And they're going to do it to a fault. Right. Right. And the reason I bring that up is I think it's indicative of that human inclination. Yes. To not only grasp for power, but when you have it, do everything you can to maintain it and build on it. And to divest yourself of power is really, in a way, is superhuman. It's supernatural. Sure. And, you know, and it's interesting, Ed, because like sitting on the city council, right? You know, having been recently appointed, you know, I really laud and appreciate, right, my positionality within the council. But I think my experiences, right, really have me humbled, right? I mean, I know that there's immense amount of influence, right, that I have in that role as city council, right? But at the same time, my upbringing, my experiences have really made me humbled. And sometimes I even forget, I'm a city council member, right? I just kind of see myself as an average Joe. Right. Now, some people, right, who are drunk over power, right, may utilize that role in a completely different way, right? Unfortunately, we don't have people on the council, to my knowledge, right, who respond and behave that way. But it kind of speaks to what you're saying, right? I mean, when we get in positions of influence, right, if you're not well-grounded, you can cause some calamity.
Right.
Whether it be an elder of a church or whatever it may be.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, you can cause real damage to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think, especially when you're talking about in these spiritual communities, when you have somebody who has spiritual authority, whether it's an elder or a pastor or anybody else, and I've experienced this in a church that we used to be a part of. The pastor has a lot of power to influence.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the pastor has their own insecurities and base how they counsel and how they say things on their own insecurities. Well, we got the beep going. You know what that means?
Damn, man, we were just getting started.
I know. We got a lot more to talk about. So thank you, Rod.
Yeah, man, we were just
getting
started. Let's get started, man. Yeah.